Okay, everybody, welcome back. Happy Wednesday. Sorry for that hiccup. Thank you for warning me about no sound. Hopefully you guys can hear me now. Should be fine. Every once in a while I get it where my OBS doesn't even pick up the sound at all, and it requires a full hard reset. So, sorry about that. Welcome back for those that have joined. Let me know if you still can't hear me. Should be fine. Going to switch back to Bitcoin today. Yesterday we had a heavy and hard look at economies around the world and NATO, specifically Russia. You all know my position on that, but perhaps I'm the only one who, the only channel that focuses both on monetary freedom, Bitcoin freedom, and also political freedom for the people of Ukraine and Eastern Europe. So, I don't know. Maybe so, maybe not, but hopefully you guys don't mind switching topics every now and then. You know, I was in my Don. So here we're at the old Bitcoin price. I was in my Don in 2014, and it's unbelievable to look back, even just where Bitcoin was in 2014. Whoops, not this peak, but this peak right there. Ukrainians started to the streets right about here, November 2013, and then we went into bear mode in the start of 2014. I was right there in Ukraine. And I remember being on the streets and seeing QR codes for Bitcoin donations. So Bitcoin has been there since the beginning of Ukraine's fight for freedom, all the way till today, which is wild. But just an update today on Bitcoin, where we are, price, trend. Those of you who have been following me long enough know that this is something that I think is very important. The power trend has been on this curve, 96% R squared, on a very similar trend, even looking back in time, since about this time, end of 2016. You can see, look at these bands. I'm fitting them sort of as they go relative to what the trend was at the time, and you can see it looks very close in the past here to the future. You know, very, very little variation. If you look back here, you can see it's jaggedy, right? Low price, uncertainty. We get sort of, this is the all-time trend. Okay, this is the all-time trend, and we can have an evolving trend, which is the dotted black line. You see that it's what the power trend would be at the time. It was growing very steep, then almost completely flattened out because of the bear here in bear, you want to say, from 2011 till the end of 2013. Went completely sideways, then up again. Then they started what was called the crypto winter. Big bear until 2017. But even with all that variation from the end of 2016, again, you see some things that look pretty close to the all-time. And what's the all-time? It's here. Okay. And when I say all-time, I just mean all data up until today. All right, so where are we? Well, we're low. This is, I had a couple database issues, so this is going to be a couple days ago. It's March 19th. When's the last day I got fed into this model? 17th. Okay, 17th. It's a little bit lower than this, obviously, as we know, price right now. But if you look at the trend line, we're a little bit under, but nowhere near the blue line, which would be a 1 sigma move down, okay? And a 1 sigma move down is 0.4x the trend. I don't see that happening. The trend at the moment, $95,000 Bitcoin, 0.4x that would be $38,000 Bitcoin. Again, I'm not a technician. I don't look at you know, the short-term moves and candles and Fibonacci and those things. This is just mathematically looking at the trend, and I have confidence in it. Not really for anything that happens with the Sovereign Wealth Fund or the Strategic Reserve. I know I've said this enough for people that listen more long-term, but this is more adoption. What you see, let's just take off some noise here. What you see here, okay, is adoption in my view. It's not necessarily liquidity. Liquidity is part of the story, but really what's happening is we're seeing a network that's open and free and distributed being adopted. And price is reflecting that adoption. And so if we can measure how price is growing, we can measure how Bitcoin, the network, is growing. And at a 96% R squared of this black line all time, it's a pretty strong showing of a power curve growth. Okay, so power growth is not exponential growth. As you can see, it's the growth rate is slowing down. Here it was hundreds of percent or even 1,000% growth here. Now we're moving from 45% growth into the end of this year is going to be 42% growth, okay? And it's been on this curve since the end of 2016. So I really don't see anything game-changing here. I know that it's super charged political times. You don't have to tell me that living in Eastern Europe. You don't have to tell the Ukrainians that. Theoretically, some tailwinds, again, from strategic reserve or a sovereign wealth fund in the United States. But more, this is just free market money being adopted. So that's my message here with this. But what I wanted to show as well in this update is the PSR. This is another thing I've been working on for years, really. I also posted this the first days of 2017 when I started my website. So to define it again, we have the market cap. Let me take off the noise. We have the market cap of Bitcoin. All right. Then we have the revenue that miners make in dollar terms, trailing 12 months. If you do it in Bitcoin terms, then it's just the emission rate. Okay. It's the decaying emission of Bitcoins. We know that. But as the emission decays, and that is an exponential decay, 16% per year, right? That's what 50 Bitcoins going into 25, going into 12 and a half, so on and so forth. 16% per year, exponential decay, price tends to rise. Now, it doesn't rise exponential. We just talked about it. It rises in power. But still, if you apply price to that Bitcoin that is decaying, the decaying block reward, plus the fees are a part of it, you'll get the miner revenue. Now, you can't even see miner revenue on this chart, right? You can see it in the tooltip. Let's just look at January of this year. We have a $2 trillion market cap. Now, I'm not in billions, I'm in millions, right? So you see 2 million means a $2 trillion market cap for Bitcoin. And you say 14,000 million dollar trailing 12-month miner revenue. What is that? That's 14 billion. Okay. So it's way smaller, actually, what miners make day in and day out versus the value of Bitcoin. And you can run a multiple on this. Okay. So if I back it out, and let me just show you actually, I got to do log scale on the left. I have to put these on, unfortunately, when I do log. So now you can see the revenue. It's a very smooth number, grows with the market cap, but it's way smaller. All right. So right now we're at a 1.6. Oh, that's a nice number, right? 1.66667 trillion dollar market cap, $14 billion trailing 12-month Bitcoin mining revenue. We can run a multiple on this. The multiple is the price to sales ratio. Okay. Network has a price. The price can be discussed in aggregate, which is multiplying by the coins. And also revenue can be discussed in aggregate. Okay. Taking all that revenue that comes in every day to miners, also the fees, slapping a dollar price, rolling it trailing 12 months, you get this ratio. It's the price to sales ratio of the Bitcoin network. What do we see? We see that it's falling. All right. Obviously, it's falling from December, November. Trump euphoria going back down. But then we want to ask ourselves, well, relative to the trend, where is it? And I don't have the trend here. I'll show it in another slide, but we can do the ranges. All right, 2% on the lower, 98% on the upper. And this is a power trend as well. It's not as strong of an R squared. I'll show you in another slide here. We can see that we're closer to the lower bound than the upper. Okay, so the lower bound, now this is a multiple over, this is a trend on the multiple. All right, so the multiple itself is about 112 right now. Let's get to the last date of data, roughly. It should be the 17th, so 117x is the trailing 12-month price of sales ratio with the Bitcoin network, 117x. If we went way to the upside where 98% of the observations would be below that, only 2% above, 285x. Below that, on the downside, rare air to the downside, 25x. Okay, so that's a big range, but these are the extremes. And we're nowhere near the top. All right. Whereas if you drew trends over the prior booms of Bitcoin, you pretty much were always at the top. All right, you hit it in 2013, you hit it in 2017, and you hit it in 2021. You kissed it right here, 172x. Sorry, 172x was the upper bound. The price of sales, 171. So we're nowhere near it. I mean, it doesn't mean that you have to be at the top to call the top. But this metric, just like the power curve metric itself, all right? And by the way, I'm also running multiples here. You see in the tooltip, 3.6x and 0.2x. Those are multiples. That's price divided by the power curve multiple. We hit that almost every top as well. All right, so didn't quite hit it in 2021. But, you know, there's certainly no signs of topping. Now, an intermediate top, could we go back down to, you know, these levels? September 2024 levels is not that long ago. Look at the multiple then. 80x, could we go back down to 80x? Sure. Could we go down to 70x? Sure. But let's try to drill down on this multiple. All right, that's why I'm going to move to this chart now. It's the same chart, but we're just drilling down on the multiples. I don't have one sigma. This is only basically 2 sigma, or around 2 sigma, which is 2% and 98% on each side. So let's, the PSR is on the right side. Okay, remember, these are multiples. It's a little bit different. But here's the trend line. Let me take the red off so you understand. Now I've drawn the trend line through it. Didn't have the trend line here. Trend line was not here. It was just open space. But I've now drawn a trend line in black around the PSR. And put price so you can understand things a little bit better. So for example, back to the last top, notice how this metric catches the first top, but it doesn't the second. I always think that's helpful. All right. So when we really got over our skis in 2021, February, March, topped out at 170x. All right. The trend line of the multiple was only 46x. So it was way over. And now, where are we? We're over trend. We're over trend. So unlike running it on straight price, where we just run the trend line on the price itself, we're under trend of that. All right. Here, we're over trend. The trend line of the multiple itself is 76x. That means the market cap 76 times that Bitcoin miner revenue that comes out every 10 minutes. All right. Annualized. You have to annualize it to understand this number. 7677x. 7677 times greater, that is market cap versus trailing 12-month revenue. But we might want to understand relative to the trend. Okay, we see that we're over trend, but anything else we can do to drill down? let's put the bands back on. Okay, the 2%, 98%. Now I think you can start to see a little bit where we are. In this chart, in this metric, we are looking a little bit hotter than this one. Okay, here we just look like we're right on trend. Here, we look like we're a little bit hot. But there are some caveats with this, okay? So, again, I'm not saying that the next top has to kiss the red line on the top. Let's take off the bottom so you know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that the PSR has to kiss the red line for the next top to occur, although it did work the last few cycles. I'm just saying it's a guide to see that perhaps that could happen again. It's also not as strong of an R squared. Okay, so the black line, the regression of the orange line, the multiple, is only a 2/3, R squared. Okay, it's still well better than the average, 68% better than the average of this multiple. So it's better from that perspective, but it's not nearly as strong as the price trend line, which is a 96% R squared. So all in all, if you had to put these two multiples together, I would say caution, but still, at least according to this multiple, and certainly according to this multiple, based on past performance, we have not neared a top. Okay. This is never financial advice. I'm not a trading channel. I'm just trying to give you the broad macro views of these things. Freedom money is being adopted. It continues to be adopted. And we certainly went up. This is also interesting to say. Look, from, the FTX debacle was here. Zero Bitcoin on their books. Sam Bankman fraud. Went to jail the next year. But even by the spring of 2023, we actually popped up against the all-time multiple. That's interesting. All right. And we've stayed above it. And then we have a real noticeable pop here with Trump being elected, inaugurated. Now we're falling back down. So caution, there could certainly be some softness, some weakness in the price, buying opportunities. All right. But I still don't see anything in this trend that looks like this or this or this or this. That is blow off tops well above the trend line extremes. I should put the 1 sigma, the blue lines, which are, like kind of 2/3 of the time. I don't have them on this chart at the moment. I'll try to put those on in a future video, but we're probably around a 1 sigma move here, up, probably. But nowhere near a 2 sigma or a, 97.5% percentile event. We had that in 2021, had that in 2017, had that in 2020, had that in 2013. Had that even in 2011, but there's very limited data here. So, and certainly nowhere near the downside. Right? We didn't even have that with the FTX puking here in this chart. We had it in 2018. I remember this well. I was on a flight like the day this puking happened, a transatlantic flight. And I remember turning my phone on when it was like left Europe here, entered America here. Obviously it wasn't like this is a daily chart, but it was that day. So I would say we're a little bit hot in this chart, but generally doesn't look like it looked like in 2021. And again, if you look at the big one, this is the big chart that will give you the cleanest signal because it's a multiple on price itself. We're right on trend, not even close to the blue lines on either side. Kind of got close in You get this Trump bump here, retreating back below trend, but still just, this is average. This is another way of saying that. At this chart, this is just, we're at an average pace of Bitcoin growth. One more thing before I sign off. I mean, this could, a lot of people are theorizing that we just stay average, right? We just stay on trend as we move up. It's possible. Markets typically don't work that way. In my experience, you get the FOMO, the greed, you get the pile-ins. Grandma starts buying Bitcoin. You know, you had it here. After Thanksgiving, people buy, so on and so forth. And then people get disillusioned. They bought too much at the top, and then they sell, and you get the, you know, FOMO, or the not the FOMO, but just the fear on the downside. People are thinking, well, maybe this time, since there's so much institutional interest now from the likes of America, that we're just going to continue on a steady trend. Maybe. But even if we do, the question is, you know, is there going to be a top still in 2025, 2026? I mean, it's exactly the question I'm trying to answer. I'm not sure. But if we take out the ruler, so to speak, we extrapolate this out to the end of 2025. If things stay on trend, and again, remember, this is the end of the 4-year cycle. If things stay on trend, it's 125K per Bitcoin. If we do hit that 1 sigma up, or 1.5x the multiple, it's about $200,000 per Bitcoin. And if we hit the 2 sigma, or 97.5 percentile, it's 3.6x. For the statisticians listening, I know it's not exactly a bell curve, it's percentiles. I'm just using 1 sigma, 2 sigma, because it's like roughly what those blue and red lines mean. So 450,000 on 3.6x. So people are saying maybe we don't have that spike anymore because there's just so many eyeballs on Bitcoin. There's so much interest on Bitcoin now compared to these prior cycles. It's possible. It's totally possible. It's possible also the cycle gets extended not from the end of 2025, but the end of 2026. So let's look out to the end of 2026. All right. A year, almost 2 years out from now, roughly. Start of 2027, let's say. Here, the trend moves up. Again, everything's always moving up here. Number go up tech. 176,000 is the trend. 1 sigma up, or the top of the blue line there, 270,000. 2 sigma up, 630,000. Generally, I'm of the opinion you're gonna hit these bands. You're gonna have a top. It might not be as an extreme looking top as 2017, 2013, 2011, or even the double top of 2021. You know, Bitcoin throws people for a loop. I was thrown with the double top, right? Because I thought double tops normally don't happen. Therefore, this was not the top. But it was. So you never quite know what Bitcoin's going to throw at us. Markets are inherently unstable, or as Keynes said, they can remain irrational for longer than you have capital. So never financial advice. Be careful. But this is clearly freedom technology. And I don't necessarily want to subscribe to one theory or the other, whether we'll just continue on this trend or whether they'll have the explosive upside. But the trend is clearly your friend here. And Bitcoin is such a new technology that, in my view, the best way to look at this chart is just to sit back and understand that this is adoption. This price curve itself means adoption. And this one, we can't really easily interpret price based on the multiple. We can just sort of look at where the multiple is relative to the top. But again, if we looked at this one, I would say, yes, it's looking hot. Yes, it could cool down for another 6 months, even a year. Who knows? but the multiple itself, that orange line, is just nowhere near prior tops. So again, never financial advice, but I don't think that this is something to be, let's say, grossly worried about as far as the midterm trend of where Bitcoin is going looks like. All right, guys. Hope you liked it. Thanks for tuning in, and have a good Wednesday.